there. Hope everyone is well. We're in the middle of another heat wave here in New York this week. The humidity is insane. Yesterday's thunderstorm was wild. It lasted for about 2 hours. The thunder was crazy. I'm one of those people that when I know there's a thunderstorm, if I'm at home, I open all the windows, keep the lights turned off, and I just lay on the couch and just listen to it. I just find it so relaxing. I know a lot of people are scared of them. I'm not one of those people. I usually read a book or just close my eyes and relax. I don't know what it is. I've just always loved them ever since I was a kid. So I kind of look forward to them every summer. But this summer so far has definitely been crazy. This humidity, I almost passed out the other day. I just went for a walk as I do every morning. And the heat was a little bit overwhelming, so I had to take it easy after that. I ended up giving myself a migraine for the day, which was no fun. TV wise this week, I started watching Search Party on HBO. It's a show that I seem to, when I come across articles or anything about it on the internet, everybody seems to love it, but I've never actually heard anybody that I know speaking about it, so I don't know if a lot of people know about it. I think it has a little bit of a cult following. It's on its 4th season now, I think, just finished, and it got renewed for a 5th season. I'm enjoying it. The first season was great, and then it's a little weird. It's kind of hard to describe it, but it's just basically a group of friends that find out that this girl that they went to college with is gone missing, and they decide to look for her, and then all this craziness starts to happen. It's got very, very dark humor. It's set in New York. I feel like it's very New York to me. I think a lot of the characters in it, I feel like I've met several people like that over the years, so it's quite funny. I watched the new Conjuring movie. It was a strange one. I enjoyed it, but it was not like the usual Conjuring movie. It definitely wasn't a horror movie. It felt more like a thriller almost. It was kind of almost like a detective movie. It's we're gonna go and investigate this story. It was kind of a strange format, but I enjoyed it though. The first half an hour was so good. Really, really gets right into the story right away, but it's definitely worth checking out. And I also watched a mini series called Years and Years. Again, it's another one I'm not sure that a lot of people maybe know about, but it got really great reviews. Emma Thompson is in it, who I absolutely love, and it's really crazy. It kind of reminded me of Black Mirror. It's based around this family, and it goes through the next few decades. Every episode it's set a few years in the future, and it's all this crazy stuff that's happened. I think 2020 was probably the right time to release a show like this because of all the madness that went on last year, and how it was so every week or every day almost there seemed to be something else crazy happening, and it's very much like that. It was really kind of creepy actually, but it's definitely got Black Mirror vibes. I would 100% check that out if that's something that you're into. So yeah, getting back to the podcast today, I want to talk about the emotional and physical toll that abuse can take on you while you are going through it. Firstly, to get into it, I just wanted to read this paragraph from No Visible Bruises by Rachel Louise Snyder. You have heard me read from this before. It's a great book. Definitely check it out. I will leave a link to it in the bio. So for just a bit of context, she's speaking about this one case with this young woman, and her family, her mom and her sister, are aware that she's being abused, and she's left him several times, but she always goes back. And this is just kind of basically explaining the mindset. So this is the long-term fallout from a lifetime of violence directed towards you. The rewiring of a brain geared solely and entirely towards survival. A brain that reacts to being under constant attack will continue to send danger signals, increase levels of cortisol, adrenaline, and other stress hormones, contributing to a vast constellation of physical and mental health issues. Disassociation is one of the more common issues, but victims of chronic domestic violence can also have a wide and long-term range of problems, from the emotional to the physical. They may have long-term cognitive loss, memory problems, or sleep disorders. They may suffer from inattention or irritability. Some research link a host of physical ailments to unresolved trauma, including fibromyalgia and severe digestive issues. In his book, The Body Keeps the Score, the author Bessel van der Kolk writes, "The most important job of the brain is to ensure our survival, even under the most miserable conditions. Terror increases the need for attachment, even if the source of comfort is also the source of terror." He believes that while post-traumatic stress in soldiers garners the most attention these days, victims of trauma, including domestic violence, are arguably the greatest threat to our national well-being. And I just thought that was really interesting. I think it's something that people overlook maybe, are the physical effects that abuse can have in your body. They're just as harrowing as the emotional. I remember it wasn't until about a year or so after I left my situation, and I just kind of noticed, I didn't like associate the two, but I just kind of noticed that I was having a lot of memory loss. Just really like, I've always been someone that I might pick up my phone to look at something and then forget what I did, or walk into a room to get something or do something and then forget straight away. I think we all have that, but this was like on another level. And I was telling my friend about it one day, and she was like, "Well, Amanda, you've just had a really traumatic few years in your life, so it's kind of understandable that things like this would happen to you." And it wasn't really until then that I kind of thought about it and, was just looking back at that kind of how those things had affected me physically throughout the years that I was with him and after. So I had really bad anxiety. I constantly had migraines. I would have dizzy spells, stomach aches, constantly having stomach aches. I used to throw up a lot. My hair started falling out in clumps. That was a huge issue at the time. I remember I couldn't really understand it, but now I know it was just stress. I remember standing in the shower one evening and I was washing my hair, and it was just clinging to my body. I had hair all over my body. It was just falling out everywhere in clumps. It was all over the bath. I remember crying my eyes out. It was just really upsetting. I was like, why is all of my hair falling out? I just couldn't understand it. I developed really bad acne. My abuser, I remember, even said to me once, "Your skin is really, really, really bad, and we're going to have to do something about it." Meanwhile, it was him who was causing my skin to be that bad. On the phone, my friends would tell me that I sounded strange, my voice sounded strange, or I sounded sad, and I would just say that I was tired and my body was adjusting to living in a new country and a new climate. Earlier this week, I was cleaning my room. I recently moved I've lived in this apartment for 5 years now, over 5 years, and it's 2-bedroom. I've always had a roommate up until last year, and I had just decided to move into the other bedroom, which is a lot bigger. So I moved a couple of months ago into this room, but I still had a lot of boxes and just random things that I hadn't put away or gone through yet. And I noticed there was a box full of my old planners and journals. I must not have opened this box for years because I'd totally forgotten that I even had them. And they go back as far as 2012, which is when I first moved here. And one of the first things that I saw, a slip of paper fell out between one of them, and it was dated for 2015. So basically every single year with my planners, I always sit down on the last of the year. It's just a tradition I've always had, and I'll write down things that, not resolutions, but like things just that I want to happen, like my goals for the year, things like that. It could be like really, really simple things like learning how to cook a specific dish, or you know, whatever it is, or you know, just wanting to buy something specifically. And then at the end of the year, the following year, I'll go back and I'll like tick off everything that I did. And so this little strip of paper fell out, and it was for 2015, so I would have written it in late 2014 when I was still with my abuser. And I noticed that one of the things on the list, and it wasn't ticked off, so I guess I didn't go back to it then, because I know that I didn't use my journals for the at least a year or so after I left him. I think I just didn't even want to think about anything at that point. But one of the things on the list was that I wanted to leave my abuser. That was my goal for that year. And believe it or not, later that year I actually did leave him. So I do think these things could work. You know, I'm a big believer in manifesting. So I just thought that was really funny. And another thing that I noticed, I was just kind of quickly reading through some of the entries from 2012 when I had first moved here, and what I noticed was just how sick I actually was and how often I was getting sick. And I'm talking like I was sick several times a week, every week. I was always drained, always had stomach aches, always throwing up, always had headaches, flu, cold, fever, constantly. These were the same things that came up all the time. And I also noticed just how often it really was that he was drinking and not coming home, which, you know, I can remember was really frequently. But I think when you just see it written down in your own words and you've kind of stepped away from it for years and not looked at it, it just seems even clearer. Another thing was I was so sleep deprived at the time. That was part of what was mentioned in the paragraph that I just read from the book. I've mentioned it before in other episodes, but he would come into the bedroom after being out all night, and I would be like sound asleep in the middle of the night, having to get up for work in a few hours, and he would wake me up just so he could yell abuse at me. He would jump on top of me, turn the light switch on and off over and over again. Like, he would just open the door and just flick the light switch on and off, on and off. Which, as you know, if you've been in a dark room and someone's turning the light on out of nowhere, not to mind flickering it on really quickly, it's painful. He would like bang doors, blare music. Even on a regular day when he wasn't drinking, he was a really, really heavy snorer. And if you're someone that's ever slept in the same room, even the same house as someone who snores, it can be torture. And no matter how many times I said it to him, how many times I said I couldn't sleep, he would never do anything to fix the problem. I was just never able to sleep with it, and he would somehow think it was my problem and I just had to get over it. I would go and sleep on the couch, and then he would get mad because I was sleeping on the couch and I wasn't sleeping in bed. And he would fall asleep constantly throughout the day. He's someone that would take like 5 naps a day and just like sleep the whole day away if he could. He would just constantly fall asleep on the couch throughout the day. So like I wouldn't even be able to watch TV comfortably because it was so loud and so irritating. It was just mental torture. There's a song that I'm not even going to say what it is, but it reminds me of my dad. It's just a song that me and my dad used to both really enjoy together, and it is a song that, like, it depends on the day, it depends on my mood. I can either love to listen to it or I find it really hard to listen to. It can either make me happy or make me sad. So mostly I try not to listen to it unless it's on purpose and I know I want to specifically seek it out. And he knew that this song affected me, but he would always play it on his guitar over and over again, just out of nowhere, even when I would ask him to please not play it. And, you know, it wouldn't even just be like I would just be in the kitchen cooking or something and he would just start playing it, and it would just be over and over and over again. I would ask him so many times to stop. He just would keep doing it. He just didn't care. And not even that he didn't care, but he just loved that it was torturing me. It was just so heartless and so cold. I was always tense, always ready for his next move. I never knew what was going to set him off, so it's like I was always ready for something to happen. And you know, if you have your body tense, I think we've all often been in situations where we're feeling anxious or stressed and your body just tenses up, and having your body tense constantly has a huge effect on it. It increases your heart rate, and I would always have muscle pain in my shoulders and my neck from just holding the muscles so taut. You're just always waiting for the next thing to happen. Another thing that people maybe don't recognize as a symptom of abuse is like the intense loneliness that victims can feel. For me, Ireland had never seemed so far away at the time, but even victims who don't live miles from their family can still feel extremely lonely and isolated, as you're so cut off from everyone. And you know, you're trying to hide such a huge secret from everyone that sometimes it's just easier not to speak to anyone in case you let the cover slip. I mastered making everything look perfect on the outside, and this wasn't just to hide this huge secret that I had from everyone else, but it was also to fool myself. You know, I was just in such denial about what was happening, so to talk about it would be to make it real. I continued on as normal as much as possible. I would speak to friends, and you know, they would ask me how things are going in New York, and I would say, oh, everything's great, you know, act like everything was fantastic, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I would speak really highly of my abuser, and you know, it's one of those things where it just goes to show that you can't ever believe what you see on social media. People will show you what they want you to see and not what's actually happening. You're isolated and you're so ashamed and so in denial that you have nobody to tell you or to clarify to you that what you're experiencing isn't okay. There were some times where I slipped and I mentioned maybe some little thing that had happened to my friends, but even still I would downplay it and make excuses for him. It's like I wanted reassurance that his behaviour was wrong, and I needed to know that they would have my back if I needed them to. But then if they were too intrusive, I would shut down completely because I still didn't want to let them in that far. I would sit there sometimes while he was screaming at me and just think, who is this guy? Where was the guy that I had known in Ireland for all those years? But the thing is that that guy never existed. Instead, he was masking the real him, because no abuser shows that they're abusive right away. I would be so heartbroken just wishing he'd reassure me and realise his mistakes, but I was just so insignificant to him. Even to myself, I was always making excuses to justify his anger, and I would look for absolutely anything, the tiniest of things, to justify it. The truth is that he was the only one who could give me relief from the pain that I was in, even though it was pain that he was causing. I would never question when he would suddenly flip and be nice to me out of nowhere, because I would just be so relieved that it's okay again, he's nice to me again. Sometimes I would punish his behaviour by not speaking to him or not texting him back or answering his calls, but the punishments never worked. They would only spur him on even more. Sometimes I even fought back and yelled at him and called him names like he did to me. I remember one time I even slapped him, but he took delight in it and he milked it for weeks. He even cowered away from me and crouched down saying, please don't hit me, please don't hit me. And it was very obviously fake, and he played it up just so he had something to hold against me. I would have done anything to stop the abuse, but it's not your job to stop it as the victim. I love this quote from Crazy Love by Leslie Morgan Steiner. She says, "Nothing I did made him hit me. Nothing I did made him stop. But still, I tried my best to be perfect." Abusers very often have backward ideas of gender roles. You need to cook and clean and cater to him. My abuser thought I had to respect him just because he was the man in the relationship. He hated his mother and idolised, his dad. He would never blame his dad for his wrongdoings. Instead, he would blame his mom for them. He was even victim blaming his own mother. He would get home really late the night before because he'd be out drinking, and then he wouldn't wake up on time for work the next morning. And he would say that it was my fault because it was my job to wake him. I would spend hours cooking only for him to complain about the food, even though his idea of cooking was microwaving. He would always find a problem and tell me, "Do it this way the next time." One time he lost his phone in a cab. It was a pretty regular occurrence. He was always replacing his phone, his iPad, or his wallet. Constantly replacing these things. And he would replace them right away when he lost them, even though he would say he had no money. So I remember one time this guy found the phone that he had lost in the cab, and he called my number from the phone. And I wasn't home at the time, so I wasn't with my ex. So he gave me his number so that when I was with my ex again, he could call him and arrange to meet up to get it back. And I didn't have a pen on me, as I said, I wasn't home, so I wrote the number on the keypad of the phone while I was on the call. So I thought it would save, but then as soon as I hung up, the number gone, just disappeared. So I called him back, but then the phone was switched off. And when I told him about it, of course, he blamed me. I remember he was extremely angry with me because it was my fault that he lost his phone and someone stole it. He would always embarrass me in front of people. He would make fun of me in front of his family and friends when we were out together. I think every couple, ribs each other and kind of makes fun of each other a little bit, but this was like on a whole other level. He would get really personal with it. He would mention private things I did or said, and he would make fun of my thoughts and opinions on things. When I had family or friends visiting from home, I would beg him to not drink while they were there, but it never happened. He would just get stupidly drunk. One time he had a friend visiting him, and they came home after a night out together, and he just started saying awful things about me to him, and it was just so humiliating. A week after my grandfather died, and I was still very fragile and definitely should have been going out at all. We went to meet his cousin and her husband who were visiting, and I'd already met both of them the previous year and really, really liked them. We'd had a great time together, but this time I was just too down to speak that much. Of course I was polite and everything, but I was just really, really quiet. And when we left, he was so pissed at me for what he said I was being a bitch to them. And when we got off the train, he got a text from his cousin, and she just asked if I was okay because she noticed that I was really quiet all night. It seemed kind of down. It was purely genuine concern on her part for me, and she wasn't by any means pissed off with me or anything, and it was very clear in the text too. But he used it as justification for him thinking that I was rude and embarrassing him. He wouldn't let it drop, even when I told him why I wasn't in the mood. And the whole walk home, he walked half a block in front of me, and I was just behind him, crying my eyes out silently. It was one of the most horrible, miserable feelings I've ever had. To be in the middle of grieving for someone you adored all your life, and to have someone who is supposed to love you be so heartless and call you a bitch for not being in a good enough mood to socialise. I'd never experienced such coldness. Even a stranger would have treated me with more kindness than that. There were times when I would pray that he would cheat on me and I would find out, because then I would have an excuse to leave. It seems so crazy now to think that I could validate cheating but had no acceptance of the fact that he was abusing me. And that's just one of the things that'll tell you how warped your mind is when you're going through this. When I was reading my journals the other day, I saw so many times where I had said one more time and I'm gone. And I even packed my bags one time, which I had completely forgotten about. But when I read it, I remembered it and just being like, whoa, I actually remember packing all of my stuff. And I remember feeling like an idiot the next day when I unpacked everything. But I always stayed. I was always hopeful that things would get better, and I always blamed it on stressful outside factors. Oh, it's because we don't have money, or he has family stuff going on, or he's tired from work, etc., 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 etc. I foolishly thought that the conversations I had with him about his behaviour were getting through to him, when the reality was he couldn't care less. Abusers are never going to accept that they are abusive, and a narcissist believes already that they're above everyone else, so why would they ever listen to what anyone is saying about them unless it's praise? I still remember the anxiety I would feel when I would turn the key in the front door every day after work. I desperately longed for the joy that I felt at work or out with friends to last while I was at home with him, but it never did. The second I would turn the key, it would change. It's like it would just overtake my body. When he left for work, only then would the anxiety and the tension leave. I would even look out of the window as he was leaving until he turned the corner and I knew he was really gone. Only then could I relax. But then it would creep back again when I knew it was getting close to the time he should be home. I would say, is he going to turn up? Is he not going to turn up? If he turned up, then it was going to be good night. But if he didn't, then I knew he was going to be out all night drinking and I was in for another night of abuse. Looking back on this time in my life, I really don't even recognise myself. I don't always remember the individual incidents, but I always remember the feelings that I had in the moment. Even when I see pictures of myself now from then, I look like a completely different person. I'm like a shadow of myself. My hair looks limp. I was extremely pale. My skin had breakouts everywhere. I had dark circles under my eyes. My eyes looked dead and I just looked sick. It really does take a huge toll on your body. Like if you're just being stressed and anxious all the time, like it's not good for you, you know. So if you can imagine when you're like, we all go through stresses and anxiety, and I think particularly the last year has been particularly stressful for everybody, and I'm sure you noticed that you're getting sicker a lot. You know, maybe you had breakouts, things like that. So if you can imagine that, but like literally every single day of your life, there's no break from it. It really makes me grateful to see how far I've come. Yesterday actually was my 9-year anniversary here in New York. I always feel a little bit weird on that day because it just reminds me of how I was about to walk into this extremely turbulent life and I had no idea what was coming. And it's kind of like I just want to go back and warn myself, don't go, turn around, don't go. But now I kind of just feel like I'm so glad I stuck it out here. I could have so easily gone home to Ireland after I left him, but I have a whole life here now. I've great friends, I've a great apartment, I just got my dream job. Obviously the pandemic has been awful for everyone, but you know, I have a lot to be happy about, so I'm grateful. So I would say just take some time today to think of something you're grateful for and to look back in your life and just see how far you have come. Whether you have been in an abusive relationship or not, I think that's something we all should do every now and again, and I promise you will feel good afterwards. So I'm going to keep this one short and sweet today. I'll be back next week. I'm going to be speaking about my experience with physical violence. Until then, my DMs are always open. IPVM me on Instagram and Twitter. Have a great week and I will see you then.